What makes a monster unforgettable? Creature design can bring a lot of life to your fantasy world building. You may draw your inspiration from mythology or creatures already established in the genre to give the audience some sense of familiarity, but it's always good to add your own flair to them. Or you may just create something completely from scratch. In today's video, we're diving into the art and science of creature design in fantasy, exploring what makes a creature memorable, how to bring them to life, and how to avoid the traps that can turn them into just another generic monster.
To me, fantasy creatures are a building block in the genre, almost as important as the magic, but yet they're not discussed as much. Picking the right creatures for your setting can really enhance the immersion of your world building, and also provide interesting challenges for the characters, or tools that can be used for problem solving in creative ways. So let's discuss some things that you should keep in mind if you want to successfully add creatures to your fantasy story. Let's get to it.
From a world-building point of view, creatures work best as a natural extension of the world they inhabit. They can help define the culture, history, and even the physical environment of your setting. Your creatures can be terrifying, majestic, or downright bizarre as long as they feel like they belong to the setting, as if they've always been part of the story's ecosystem. When done well, they add immersion to your world, making it feel alive and immersive. Think of the Balrog in The Lord of the Rings. Its presence in the mines of Moria ties directly to the history of the place. Moria was once a great dwarven kingdom, but their greed led them to delve too deeply, awakening the Balrog. That story echoes throughout Middle-earth, symbolizing the danger of disturbing ancient powers. The Balrog exists to create tension, but also as a piece of the world's larger puzzle. The Balrog is also pretty much a Tolkien creation, with inspirations drawing heavily on mythological, religious, and literary archetypes, while also reflecting Tolkien's own themes of corruption, the destructive power of greed, and the dangers of disturbing forces better left alone. Its design blends the familiar with the mythical. The Balrog can be traced back to a mix of influences. Some people argue the fire and shadow motifs draw influence from Norse mythology, but it also ties back to the concept of fallen angels in the Bible. The Balrog fell from grace during Morgoth's rebellion and became an embodiment of destruction and terror. Shadow and flame also fit the description of demons in Christian texts. Another strong influence are probably epics like Beowulf, which Tolkien studied extensively. Grendel, a shadowy, destructive figure dwelling in darkness, shares thematic similarities with the Balrog. Finally, the creature also fits the story thematically. Tolkien expresses his disdain for industrialization and the destruction of natural beauty, with the Balrog's association with fire and smoke. The creature evokes the imagery of furnaces, coal, and the consuming fires of industry that Tolkien criticized as destructive forces.
So, what we can learn from the Balrog is that, in case you want to create your own species, a good practice is to mix different mythologies and references to avoid it feeling too similar to pre-established creatures. If it is too similar, you may as well just use the pre-established creatures to avoid overcomplicating things when that's not necessary. Also, if the creature fits your world building, affects and it's affected by your setting in concrete ways, and tie back really well to your themes, even better for making the creatures feel like an organic addition to your settings. As mentioned with the Balrog example, creatures should be used to ideally reflect or challenge the themes of your story. When you're exploring ideas like power, survival, or morality, your creatures can embody these ideas or act as a foil to them. This connection elevates the creature from just a cool monster to something that resonates on an emotional level.
Think of the dragons in Game of Thrones. They start as symbols of Daenerys' power and her right to rule. But as the story progresses, they also reveal the darker side of power, destruction, hubris, and loss. They're awe-inspiring, but they're also a constant reminder of how dangerous, unchecked ambition can be. The dragons are not only thematic, but also an integral part of Daenerys' arc and the overall message of the series.
Notice how they are also a pre-established creature in the genre. This is totally fine if the exploration of the creature in the story is done in a thematically consistent way. It is, however, useful to think about current trends and oversaturation. Dragons were a bit overdone during the Game of Thrones hype. The same thing happens to vampires and zombies before them. So, unless you want to tackle them with a fresh take, you may consider exploring other creatures to avoid having your audience rolling their eyes.
Creatures are amazing tools for creating tension and driving the plot forward. Whether they're obstacles, allies, or catalysts for transformation, they bring action and stakes to the story. But the best creatures are woven into the narrative in a way that feels meaningful. They challenge your characters, forcing them to grow, adapt, or make tough choices, or they can be used as tools for creative problem solving. Think of the Dementors in Harry Potter. These creatures are easily established as threats because they suck the joy and hope out of anyone near them. They also perfectly embody the book's darker themes of fear, trauma, and recovery. Their presence creates constant tension, as Harry struggles with his own vulnerability in the face of their attacks. Learning to conjure a Patronus is a symbolic act of reclaiming hope and strength in the face of despair. The Dementors work as immediate tools for tension building and as a physical threat, but also as an ideological threat for the characters. Harry needs to decide if he will let the weight of the losses that he suffered lead him to inaction and depression, or overcome these crushing feelings of hopelessness to come out triumphant on the other side. They elevate the stakes of the story by making the world feel more dangerous and oppressive, both in a concrete and immediate way, as well as in an ideological way for the main character's arc. Drawing from mythological roots gives your creatures a solid background and resonance. Audiences often connect with creatures inspired by legends because they carry the weight of storytelling, traditions, and symbolic meanings. These roots can add layers of richness to your world, which are easier to establish. Because of pre-existing knowledge from the audience, using mythical creatures as a basis, you can borrow, adapt, or subvert their traits to create something that feels fresh yet familiar. For example, the Chimera from Greek mythology is a fascinating blend of creatures: a lion, a goat, and a serpent combined into one scary monster. This amalgamation emphasizes its unnatural, chaotic nature. Modern interpretations often tweak these elements. The Chimera's cultural roots provide a foundation for endless reinterpretations, keeping it relevant while retaining its mythological gravitas. Believability in creature design often comes down to their behavior and biology. A great creature should move, act, and react in ways that feel consistent with its environment. Consider how it survives, hunts, and interacts with other elements of your world. Grounding a creature in a believable ecological or biological context makes it easier for audiences to suspend their disbelief and engage with the story. Think of the griffin from ancient mythology, a creature with the body of a lion and the wings and head of an eagle. Its combination of predator traits makes it believable as a fierce guardian, fitting the symbolic role it often plays in myths. Griffins are typically depicted nesting in mountains or guarding treasure. This interplay between biology and myth adds complexity to the griffin, making it feel like it could truly exist in its mythological world.
This is a very important aspect of creature design. With dragons, for example, it bothers me sometimes how authors don't consider how they should impact the setting and how people should react to them. A dragon alone could destroy an entire kingdom or a forest from afar. If they are really that prevalent in your setting, for millennia for example, shouldn't the vegetation have developed some sort of resistance to dragon fire? Shouldn't the military have developed armor or fortresses that could resist a dragon fire attack? If you consider a simple real example, think of cows, right? This animal influences the meat industry, raises political discourse about animal cruelty. They are commercialized in many different shapes and forms. They are worshipped by some cultures. Different parts of their body are sold like the leather. Their mere existence affects landscapes and nature. Think of all the forests that are being devastated for like cattle raising and to plant soy to feed them. In the example of the dragon, shouldn't the society also be deeply impacted by their existence from the point of view of politics, biology, geography, economics, and even history? If you don't consider that, the creature feels like an afterthought and not fully integrated in your setting.
Creatures work better if they carry a deeper meaning beyond their physical form. They can symbolize abstract ideas like fear, power, greed, or even humanity's darker instincts. Give your creatures a metaphorical layer and they will become reflections of your story's themes or your character's struggles. Think about what your creature represents in the broader narrative. Is it a manifestation of guilt or a test of courage? These symbolic layers enrich your world building and add depth to your story, making the creatures memorable for what they stand for. A great example is the xenomorph from Alien. While it's a terrifying predator on the surface, the xenomorph also symbolizes primal fears, such as violation, helplessness, and the almost unstoppable force of nature. Its parasitic reproductive cycle evokes themes of survival at the cost of others, a metaphor for unchecked instinct and survivalism. The xenomorph reflects human vulnerability, making it one of the most iconic and thought-provoking creatures in science fiction.
Moral ambiguity can also be good for your creature design. Making your audience question their assumptions about something, it's usually a good tool for storytelling. Maybe the monster is simply misunderstood, or it has its own sense of justice that clashes with the protagonist's goals. Creatures with their own motives, needs and perspectives feel more realistic and compelling. They challenge the characters and the audience to grapple with tough questions about morality and the nature of good and evil. If a creature is acting based on their pure instinct, it makes you think to what extent our sense of morality isn't just also a subproduct of human survival impulses. And absolute morality doesn't really exist.
Take the T-Rex from Jurassic Park. While it's undeniably a predator and a danger to the characters, it's not inherently malicious. It's simply an animal acting on instinct. This ambiguity makes the T-Rex more interesting. By the end of the film, it even shifts into a kind of anti-hero role, taking down the velociraptors and inadvertently saving the protagonist. Its morally neutral nature, neither fully monster nor savior, adds layers to its presence in the story. One common pitfall in creature design is overloading your world with too many creatures, which can dilute their impact.
If every corner of your story is teeming with fantastic beasts, it risks making the extraordinary feel ordinary. Creatures should feel special and integral to the story, not just there for spectacle. Few well-developed creatures with distinct roles in the plot and world building will leave a stronger impression than a swarm of underdeveloped ones. Think quality over quantity.
In the Fantastic Beasts franchise, the creatures feel surface level. There are simply too many species for too little screen time to make anyone care about any of them. It makes us feel like they are being created for the sole purpose of selling plushies and merchandise. In The Hobbit, Smaug stands out not just because he's a dragon, but because he's the dragon. His role as the central antagonist gives him weight, and the build-up to his appearance makes his presence even more impactful. If Middle-earth were teeming with other dragons at every turn, Smaug's menace and grandeur would feel far less significant. The scarcity of dragons in Tolkien's world helps Smaug remain iconic.
Another issue is creating creatures that feel out of place for your story setting. Every creature should have a purpose and fit naturally into the ecosystem, culture, or mythology. You shouldn't have mermaids on a desert planet. If a creature feels disconnected, like it's been dropped in without thought or consideration about how it interacts with the world within characters, it risks breaking immersion. Always consider how the creatures live, what they eat, and how they interact with the setting around them.
The sandworms in Dune are a fantastic example of integrated creature design. These massive creatures are a crucial part of the planet Arrakis' ecosystem and culture. The sandworms produce spice, the most valuable resource in the universe, which ties them directly to the story's themes of power, survival, and environmental stewardship. Their behavior, avoiding rhythmic vibrations, shapes how people live and travel on the desert planet. Even the Fremen, who have learned to coexist with the sandworms, incorporate them into their mythology and way of life, writing them as a rite of passage. This integration ensures the sandworms feel like an organic part of the Dune universe, enhancing the world building while driving both the plot and its themes. Creature design is one of the most exciting aspects of fantasy storytelling, but it's about so much more than just making something look cool. The best creatures are connected to the world, themes, and characters of the story. They reflect the culture and mythology of the setting, challenge the protagonists in meaningful ways, and carry symbolic weight that resonates long after the story ends. You can draw inspiration from mythology, craft something entirely original, or reimagine familiar creatures. The key is to make them feel integral to the world and narrative. With care and creativity, your creatures can become unforgettable cornerstones of your setting.
So what's your favorite creature in fantasy? And why does it stand out for you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear about monsters, allies, or beings that capture imagination. Also, we just hit the 1000 subs mark and I'm very excited and grateful about that. So thank you guys. What I plan for next video is to have a more relaxed, less structured conversation. So I will be talking about the channel a little bit from a personal level and also answering some of your guys' comments and questions. So if you have any comments and questions that you want to be addressed, leave them in the comment section below and I'll make sure to talk about this in the next video. Thanks for watching and thanks for your support. Come join our Tavern discussion of fantasy storytelling and world building here at Loregeist. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. Thanks for watching and may your tales be ever epic.